Me and my brothers were only young when we were told that our maisonette, it's like a duplex, was going to be demolished by the council. I was 9 and my brothers were 8 and 5. The council offered us a nice new house to go to and live in, and we were so excited because the block of maisonettes we lived in was run down and long past the point of repair. The day of the move was uneventful in itself. My mother was run ragged trying to get all of our things in with 3 small children underfoot, and how we didn't get yelled at more than once, I don't know. Of course, there were the usual arguments of who was getting that bedroom, and I ended up with the smallest because my brothers had to share a room. Needless to say, I wasn't entirely pleased, but the excitement of having my own space made it feel like it wasn't a big deal. A couple of nights after we moved in, my 8-year-old brother, who we'll call Steve for this, told me that he hadn't slept properly the night before. My mom asked him why, and he said it was because of the scratching in the ceiling and the creaking. My mom, busy as she was getting ready for work, told him it must be the house settling and that there were mice, which is why he was hearing scratching. That seemed logical, so we all just carried on with our daily lives. The complaints about not sleeping and funny noises carried on for a good week, and each time my mom told him to just try and ignore it. Unfortunately, I have a habit of sticking my nose into things because I was getting curious at this point. Now, you should know that unlike in our maisonette, we had a hatch that led directly into the attic to allow people to store things up there. I suggested that Steve and my other brother, who we'll call John, go up there and see if we could see what was causing it. To sweeten the deal, I suggested we might even be able to catch a new pet mouse. I know, I'm an idiot, but I was 9, and a pet mouse seemed cool then, even though I hadn't thought about where we'd keep one even if we found one. Anyway, a couple of days later, my mom had run to the local shop to get some bits for dinner, and we were left to our own devices. We knew we only had about 10 minutes before she came back, so we made our move. The moment we were certain she was out of earshot, we ran up the stairs to where the hatch was. We didn't have a step ladder, so we carefully climbed onto the banister and balanced ourselves so that we could lift Steve up to move the hatch. The plan was that we would push him up, and then he'd help us by pulling us up behind him. The first part of the plan worked really well, and Steve pushed aside the hatch, and me and John grabbed a leg each and pushed him up. He moved the hatch to one side, and his head disappeared inside the hole. Seconds later, he let out a shriek and fell back down. It was all I could do to twist his fall so he didn't go all the way down the stairs. Instead, he laid on the hallway floor, his face white, and he couldn't speak, even when I asked him what was wrong. Instead, he pointed at the hole. Me, being both brave and stupid, wanted to get my hands on whatever scared the hell out of my brother because I'm the only one allowed to do that. Even now, nearly 35 years later. I didn't wait for John to help push me up. I climbed back up on the banister and made a leap of faith for the hole. Somehow my hands managed to get a grip of both sides, using the wall and the door frames as leverage. I got my shoulders up through the hatch and rested on my stomach. I looked around at first, and I didn't see anything in the dim light provided through the hatch, and was about to call him a wuss and climb back down. Then I heard a creak. And another. It was coming from the far corner of the attic. The corner was dark, but it seemed there was a shadow there. I looked back and shouted to John to get me the torch, while Steve was telling me to get down. John did as I told him, and moments later he handed it up to me. I switched it on and shone it right at the shadow. I wish I hadn't. There, in the corner, was a rocking chair, and seated in the rocking chair was an old man. There was an air of evil about him, and I knew, bone deep, that if I didn't get out there real quick, I was going to die. It's a heavy concept at 9 years old, and the man himself didn't look scary. He was just wearing some dark trousers and what looked like a broken cardigan and bluish shirt. It was his face, and the look on it. That face still pops up in my dreams sometimes. His mouth was twisted in a weird grimace that was almost a smile, but made him look like he was going to eat me, and his eyes were icy blue with an otherworldly glow. His arms were resting on the arms of the chair, and he was scratching the wood with his nails as he rocked. It took me a few moments to realize what I was looking at, and a small, stubborn part of me wanted to challenge the look he gave me, if for no other reason that he upset my brother and I wasn't having it. That stubborn part quickly retreated, though, because he stood up. An old man shouldn't have moved that fast, and it scared the crap out of me like my brother. I fell back out of the hatch onto the hallway floor. That hurt like a wicked one, and it took a second to get my breath back. I told John and Steve to scamper downstairs fast and pretend like we'd never been up there. Me being the eldest carried some weight, and they did as they were told. I managed to get to my feet and grab the broom that had been in my mom's room. Using the end of it, I tried to maneuver the hatch back into its position. As I did, what little bravery I had came back, and I shouted up to the hatch. "You stop scaring my brother, or I'll get my mom on you! She'll make you go away!" The old man had one last scare for me, though. As the last of my words echoed away, the old man's face appeared at the hatch and gave me a grin. It was a twisted and evil grin, and spoke louder than the words that he'd love to see her try it. Then he disappeared. I dropped the broom and ran downstairs. Not a minute later, my mom came back from the shops and asked what we'd been doing. To cover my brothers, I said I wanted to climb up and see the attic, but couldn't get all the way up, so I'd left the hatch open, and I was sorry. I could tell she was exasperated, but she said she'd borrowed the neighbor's ladders and put it back, and told me to not try that ever again. I didn't hesitate to agree. I would have sooner pulled my own teeth than go back up there. A few weeks passed, and we'd almost forgotten that incident, and we were happily making friends with the neighbor's kids. One of them had a brother who was pretty cool to our eyes. He was in high school, after all, and we weren't. The brother asked us one day how we liked living in Dirty Dave's old house. We asked him who Dirty Dave was, and why that seemed funny to him. He told us that there used to be an old man in that house, and that he'd been known to have been friendly to children, and lured them into his house. From there, what he did was unspeakable, but I'm sure you can imagine. Dave had died in that house, my friend's brother said, but they were all sure he was still around trying to befriend children. I asked him what Dave looked like, and to a T, they described the old man to me, and Steve had seen, when we'd poked our heads up there. The hairs on my arms tried to stand on end, but because I was in front of the cool kid, I did my best to hide it and said we hadn't seen or heard anything weird, and gave my brother a glare to make sure he agreed with me. From that night on, though, I kept an ear out, just in case Dave tried to visit. The following stories are both submitted by user SheB515. They recount strange happenings around the state of Oregon. These are their stories. I had an invisible barrier moment when I was still working at Home Depot at Mall 205. I was coming back from Target on my lunch break. I'll admit I was distracted. I was on my phone playing an augmented reality game as I was walking on the sidewalk, but I was still glancing up to see who or what was in front of me. But I ended up running into something anyway. I was wearing Air Force Ones, and I heard and felt my foot colliding with what sounded like solid concrete. I stumbled forward, almost losing my phone, and felt something like hard rock scrape against my right shin. I caught my balance. Whoa. I looked around at my legs and feet to see what I ran into. Was it one of the decorative stone garden beds? It wasn't. That was feet away from me. Maybe it was one of the pallets of cinder blocks. Nope. That was even further away from me than the closest stone garden bed. There was nothing. My foot had definitely kicked something like a hard stone wall, and I scraped my skin against it and almost fell. But there was nothing there. The pavement was clear. I told one of my coworkers, and they informed me that one guy from receiving had experienced the exact same thing. Also on their way back from Target. I went into the bathroom when I came back from lunch and checked on my leg. It was bleeding. Definitely weird. This next story takes place at Clackamas Town Center Barnes & Noble. Despite opening just a few decades ago in the 80s, this mall has a traumatic history, with several shooting events, the most severe and terrifying being the gunman from 2012. This event happened last October. As a store, we were running behind on all of the evening duties that had to get done before we left. After helping out in the cafe and on the sales floor, I went into the office to do paperwork for the night. When my superior came in to help me, they sit down next to me and start their portion of the work, when we hear from the other side of the closed door a questioning, "Hello?" I didn't pay attention to it, only that it was an associate who finished their tasks and was waiting to see me who was available to let them out. But my superior looks at me, worriedly, and asks, "Did you hear that?" I shrugged and said, "Yeah. Isn't it just someone waiting to be let out?" "I let everyone out already." I couldn't think of a way to respond to that. I could only blink. And then we heard it again. "Hello?" This time it was a tad bit softer. We frantically scrambled to finish our paperwork. At this point we were less concerned about an associate and more concerned about a lost customer still stuck in the store. We both locked up the office and break room doors, then went out to the sales floor. We separated and searched all through the aisles, and checked the possible access ways that may have been locked, only to find ourselves relocking them. The bathrooms were clear. Upstairs was clear. The elevator was clear. Downstairs was the same. After several thorough minutes of searching throughout the store, we decided to make a note for morning management and just left. Throughout the night, we received no notification of movement within the store or any problems with the alarm sensors. Several months later, we still don't know what we heard. "Hello?"